is actually my findings. When I did my ayahuasca research, the biggest project, this is my results, this little head here with all these little things. So I might maybe just cut to the chase and say, what did I find out when I use all the scientific things? Right? It might be interesting. I can do it real quickly, just wrap it up fast. So this is a head that shows differences between 12 people before and after sort of baseline and then after ayahuasca. 12 people. Research was done in Brazil. And the solid lines simply mean there's more communication between those regions in both cerebral hemispheres, anterior, posterior, more information. The dotted lines means the opposite, less information across the hemispheres. And it showed up in frequencies all the way from 20 to 60 cycles per second, which is a high beta and gamma frequencies. So what does that mean? Well, I think it means that the hemispheres are talking to each other in a different way. And normally the left hemisphere inhibits the right hemisphere. Like right now we're not dreaming. We're in waking consciousness. But tonight we'll dream, we'll go to sleep. So there's something in states of consciousness, and if you do certain practices, you can alter those natural rhythms. And ayahuasca alters this natural rhythm. I think it builds upon a rhythm that's already there, but brings it into the time and the experience in ayahuasca. Basically, there's almost like a disconnection, or less, actually what it is, it's less, it reduces the normal left hemisphere inhibition upon dreaming and dreamlike cognition. So that you can dream when you're awake, when you take ayahuasca. That's my hunch. Now, I replicated this myself, but nobody else has replicated it. So it could be just a
what does the solid line mean compared to the dotted
enhanced communication between anterior and posterior in both hemispheres. And the dotted line means a reduction in communication between the two hemispheres.
And so fMRI gave that
no,
data?
EEG.
EEG.
Yeah, EEG. And then the reason I put this head over here, this is a pop, because I like the head there with the one head and the other head. Something nice about that.
It's so fascinating because we've become enamored of the whole idea of left and right connecting more.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a kind of a functional disconnection. The normal disconnection between the two hemispheres is altered, which in some sense makes sense. When you take ayahuasca or any psychedelic, there's two things going on to me. For me, I usually retain my reflective capacities to some extent. I don't lose them. I can still witness what's happening. But then there's this dream stuff happening in real time. So there's two hemispheres almost working independently of each other. And I think that particular situation where you have two modes of cognition happening at the same moment in time, that creates a special opportunity for insight and understanding.
What happens to the corpus callosum?
The corpus callosum is operating in a different way. Okay, it's the fiber tract for stuff that's shooting across the two hemispheres. Yeah.
Frank, are you in agreement with the idea that in brain embodied, obviously you are in this closest world, different hemispheres, disclose different realities. Are you in agreement that the right is sort of the master and the left is more the servant, or are you thinking that the left
is too much of a master in this culture, but other cultures it's the opposite.
And does it? Yeah. Okay.
So I think cultural. I think culture modulates which hemisphere is going to be dominant.
Yeah.
Some cultures there's no left hemisphere working at all.
Yes.
Or maybe that's unfair, like hunter-gatherers. There's a lot of left hemisphere stuff in terms of tracking animals.
Right.
In terms of there's a lot of cause and effect. Figuring out things, you know.
Categorizing.
Yeah.
The right, though, you think is more holistic?
I just think the optimal balance between the two hemispheres is, I think, really what's most creative. And also flexibility to shift that balance because of circumstance. Let's say you're having an ayahuasca experience, it's very intense. You want to start to reflect upon what has worked in the past for you to stabilize your body, right? You want to remember, you want to actually do things that are quite directive. You don't want to be lost in more imagery, right? You want to have that reflective awareness guide you to those navigation skills that you've already developed. And it's sort of like remembering. What should I do at this moment? Oh yeah, I get at that mala I use, and I breathe, Yeah, that's what I do. So it's because that's really important to regulate.
So people who have less reflective ability, you all know some of them, they're more likely to have a bad trip and not stay grounded. Yeah.
Anybody who has done any kind of reflective practice, be it being analysis or being in any kind of introspective training or anything, is going to be that person's going to have a richer experience after ayahuasca.
Yeah.
Anybody that's young and goes into it fresh and haven't done any practice, they're going to tumble around.
Yeah.
So I clearly think I always advise some kind of systematic introspective practice. It's really because ayahuasca gives you what you've already been working on. It gives you back more information on what you've already been focused on, and it just gives you more.
It's usually done in community for a good reason too, right?
It's usually in communities. So that's just a little sketch.
I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
is there increased communication, overall communication with ayahuasca?
Yeah, you see, it's like the whole head lights up, okay? And there's a lot of research being done in England right now about LSD doing the same thing. I don't know if you've seen some of those images, but boy, there's enormous amount of processing going on during psychedelics. Many more regions are talking to many more regions, both with all the psychedelics that are currently being studied. I think that's true for all of them. I think ayahuasca, there haven't been enough studies that use the same method to study all the psychedelics. It's hard to know. Like my question is, how come ayahuasca connect more with discarnate entities? What's that about? Beings, a presence that has no body, but you feel like a presence there, like
A ghost.
I mean,
Carnival.
the existential humanistic psychotherapists are talking about presence in psychotherapy. Like, what is presence in psychotherapy? A sense of presence? Maybe a Buber's conception of I, thou, something different in the relational field. Anyhow.
Is it a stretch to say that the discarnate entities would mirror the Jungian archetypes of the collective unconscious?
No, I don't want to go there because the risk is that I'll have to sort of defend Jung. And I'd rather say, well, maybe Jung was pointing at something similar, but I'm not going to use his terms. It's really, I realize that ploy is really good. Don't use other people's terms. Because then you get pigeonholed and have to defend them yourself, and you come up with your own terms.
See the same kind of entities from one person to another?
I will show some, actually there's a handout. Let me just pass it out now. So, this handout is my version of Jung's archetypes. But I'm looking at them I look at them as imagistic, energetic patterns that have to do with transformation processes. Let's say an example would be, remember we talked about, repeatedly we've talked about breaking down and breaking through. So for me, there's a sequence that we go through when we break down and we break through. And you'll see it in the first 3 stages of my handout. I think that's a kind of pattern that really is there for many people, and they go through a sequential set of stages. And I've tried to look at that in men and women. I've tried to start to sort of see if I can justify this model. And I've given names to these things that are my names. So that, again, if you look at the chart below, you'll see I've created names for these different energetic patterns. But it has to do with different. The first set of 3 is what I call related to healing. And the middle 3, I think, are related to creativity, and the final 3, I think, are related to spirituality. So I think healing and creativity and spirituality are all part of the same process. I don't think they're different, but I think as we go through them, I think we experience different things. So I really want to see healing as creativity and spirituality as well. Yes.
Frank, what is the picture on the right? Where did you get the
Picture? This is one of Pablo Amarengo's paintings. And it's one of my favorites because it suggests, I met Pablo and talked to him about this painting, so he explained it to me a little bit. So this would be a discarnate entity that's coming, helping the shaman. This is the shaman with the flame and coming. If you've ever looked at pictures of Muhammad getting ready to ascend to the heavens, he has the same kind of flame shooting out of his head. Yeah.
It looks to me like a Santana album.
No, That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So here's a discarnate entity supervising, guiding, I would say, the shaman. The shaman is also not just having guidance from a discarnate personification, but also this energetic vortex. So so this is what we could think about what is the nature of projection in a spiritual sense. Like when a Tibetan Buddhist sees a deity, like green Tara, it's sort of like this. But what's the essence of the energy behind green Tara? It's obviously it's not that form. It's some essential energy, something. And I think that's what's represented by this word. So the two are there: the energetic, subtle, and the subtle form, and the energetic form. Still form. And the patient, the person being healed, the community that we talked about, the need for community. This is always very important in shamanism. And then we see, whoa, what's this creature here? There's a lot of these that show up. These are all different types of discarnate entities that are in this different spiritual worlds. This one I think is beneficial. Here we have just a kind of, this would be like, when you enter, so this would be a healing act facilitated by ayahuasca and the shaman and the entities, but the shaman is actually in this other world. And when you go to this other world, there's a whole lot of entities doing other stuff up there too. So that would be, and this is Pachamama, which is female snake, which is for the Shipibo. It's really like feminine divinity. So he's a Shipibo shaman from Peru. So here's another, I just wanted to show a couple of these. The palette, the colors. If anyone here has done ayahuasca, I don't know if these are the palette that you see, but I see, like for me, I can pick out paintings where I've seen that palette, I've seen those designs. There's not something that's totally arbitrary. There's a palette of shapes and forms and energetic patterns that people report and say, yes, I saw something like that too. Yeah.
That was one of the things that was really remarkable to me when I first started hearing about the ayahuasca experience, like maybe 15 years ago, is that people would say that the actual content, the symbolic content, they would see snakes, they would see jaguars, and then I wonder, is that the substance or is that the kind of cultural setting, ceremony?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
It's also
Has
an important question.
has that report that people get similar kinds of content, is that also true now that the experience has become so widespread? Now people are getting ayahuasca off the internet and they're doing it in much
Well,
more
one way to
settings.
find out is go to the ayahuasca forum. It's a place where people upload all their ayahuasca reports. And I shared a dissertation and just looked at all those reports. And so what's there? And you'll see enormous uniformity and a lot of individual differences, too. And if you look at reports from people from South America who are Western educated, it looks like the reports from Western educated people anywhere. But if you look at people that have a different type of background in education, then you're going to see some variation. So culture plays a big role. Your religious upbringing brings a big role. Your resistance to your whatever you grew up in plays a strong role. If you want to see philosophy, you'll see philosophy. If you love art, you'll see art. If you're working on architecture, you'll see beautiful architecture. So there's these individual passions that people have, and it looks like ayahuasca releases a new way to look at your passion.
So you would agree that it shares that kind of quality?
There's some sharing, but there's a good deal of unique experiencing too. So I don't know what that means in terms of, philosophical questions, but just from a kind of a practical point of view, I think that's what's going on. But whenever you talk to somebody, and I collect stories, from people about ayahuasca experiences, and collected probably 500 stories. And there are themes that keep showing up again and again. And that's what this handout is. The handout is a distillation of the themes that I've encountered a whole lot.
So far, this is kind of visual. Do people record also sound, music?
Some people, it's all through the body and movement.
Whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah, it could be any modality. And some people, it's all gesture. It's all gestural. Like we were talking about Laing and gesture. For some people, it's purely nonverbal. And it's almost like the whole thing takes place in the body. And, yeah.
So is this, when you get into the state, is it, I always wonder, is it dosage related, or is it you know, a set pattern once you pass in the
For
dosage?
me, it was, in the beginning, I didn't know what dosage I should take, and I probably took too much in the beginning. And over time, I was able to relax more and more with it because I got comfortable, that it wouldn't hurt me, that I was safe. So the more and more you relax, the less and less you need. So now I need about 20 milliliters now. But in the beginning, I was drinking like 80 milliliters of ayahuasca.
So reverse tolerance.
In a way, it's relaxation. Because if you're really scared, you can just turn it all off. And let's say there's an emergency next to you. Let's say you're in a situation and someone's having an emergency and you have to do CPR. It's going to end like that. You're just going to stop. You can just shut it off. That's happened to me.
So I know someone who said they actually took a large dose and had no experience.
Yeah.
Everybody around them was tripping their brains out.
Yeah, some people, also there's metabolic differences. So partly it's just purely a metabolic difference. Sometimes we could think of it as, I know of people who have taken massive doses and then when they get in the right mood, they'll take a smaller dose and have a very strong experience.
So if you have a lot of fear of it, just shut it down.
Somehow I think also being intellectual shuts it down.
Being intellectual.
If you're overly intellectual,
Yeah.
I know, like, when we move through one slide, I'll tell you, these are the things I already talked. I just put this up here because it's the romanticization of what my work. You know, look at that picture. Isn't that romantic? I mean, it's a beautiful guy, you know, he's just decked out all in his robes, and it's something so romantic about that, don't you think? Even the rain patterns start to look romantic. This is the real thing, that's a romantic. But this is Luis Eduardo Luna, and this is Michael Winkelmann, the anthropologist. And both were my participants, so I was able to record their EEG, and they were great because they just allowed me, they didn't worry, they didn't fuss, and they were very experienced. And Luis, at the top there, has had ayahuasca for he said maybe 1,200 times.
Right.
So that's a lot of ayahuasca. And so I learned some really kind of anecdotal things that I think are fascinating. One is, after his session, like the session that I did was, like Michael's wired up there with the electrodes. I didn't have people wear caps because after a while the cap starts to press on your head and gives you a headache. And I wanted to record people during the ayahuasca and all night and did a sleep recording and then the next day. So I wanted to record them for like 14 hours. And you can do that if you put each electrode on separately. So that's why it looks like this. But Michael, he had the feeling that everything that he experienced was reflection of his mind. He was always would wonder, what is my mind doing now showing me this, you know? And he so much wanted to have a true classic shamanic journey where you go to another world. And when I taped a little microphone onto everybody's cheek, so they had a little microphone right there. So every 15 minutes I would say to people during ayahuasca, I say, what's going on now? And then we'd give a report, right? And Michael kept saying, oh, I think I'm seeing something related to my mother. I said, Michael, are you sure it's about your mother? He couldn't get out of thinking, trying to figure it out. And yet he so much wanted to have this experience of just going to another world, you know? And yet I realized that the individuals that I've worked with that tend to want to figure things out and really have a hard time to set that aside couldn't go as deep as other people could go. They couldn't let go of the figuring out. And that really taught me a lot about figuring out. And it's also why I have this underlying theme about going beyond thought. I think to me that's extremely important. It doesn't mean you go beyond reflection. It doesn't mean you go beyond looking and noticing. But you go beyond sort of propositional thought, or what Heidegger calls calculative thought. That's the kind of thought you want to go beyond.
Nobody knows my phone number.
Nobody hears this. This is all just imaginary.
Sorry.
So I had relatively low tech field research lab. So I can record that many sensors, that's 19 sensors, and the readout of 19 sensors, that's the actual raw EEG up there. And the actual device that records the EEG is about this big, it's very small, the whole thing can fit in like a travel, carry-on luggage. So it's a way I can go into different settings. I've done this in India and also in Peru and Brazil. So this is a little bit about what I think. See, I think ayahuasca works upon the normal kind of fluctuation in our states. We were talking, what are altered states? Well, these are altered states. These are the ones we go through every night. These are the altered states of dreaming every 90 to 110 minutes. Every night, like clockwork, there's this cycle going and we dream every 90 to 100 minutes. And every night, it's the same way. We have a short little REM period. The first one, 5 minutes, 8 minutes. But the last one, right here, this one could be 30 minutes. And when you look at this phenomenological, if you look at the experiences that people report, this one's got all kinds of archetypal, bizarre stuff going on. The first one's a bunch of day residue stuff. And it progressive from the familiar to the most, more and more outlandish until you get to this last one. And it's interesting that meditators often want to meditate right here at 4 a.m. So this is my other hunch. I have a hunch that the spiritual systems have built upon their intuitive knowledge of these cycles. And they do certain things at certain times for a reason. It works better. Meditation works better around here. And maybe not for everybody. I actually like a little bit later. I like about 6. For me, 6 is good. So it might be some individual differences. Like, have you noticed how sharp your mind is? Let's say you have to do something that really is difficult, that you're putting off because it's so difficult. I sort of have a particular window of time when I work on such things. Because my mind is very sharp then, and it's more disciplined then, and it's also easy for me to do difficult work. And either I'm emotionally resistant about or just it's difficult. For me, it's like 6 to 7 a.m. is the perfect window for me. So I think there's a variation that we have across the night. But the interesting thing is that the variation, this is a little bit, is also continues in the day. So here's the REM cycle at night. Look at this other continuing cycle. This is the ultradian rhythm that continues throughout the day. This is a 24-hour cycle, so we're changing all the time, every day.
What's the daytime cycle of?
This is night. This is when you go to sleep. This is your first REM period, right? So here you wake. So what happens when you awake? You get this big peak. This is the peak my big peak is when I do my best work, right?
Peak of what?
Peak of left hemisphere capacities. Alertness, focus, that naturally comes at that time. So it looks like we're built to go through activity and rest cycles. We modulate through activity and rest cycles every 90 to 110 minutes. That's what the research shows that. If you look at the performance research, it's very well documented.
So the ayahuasca is a combination of the DMT source and also the copy, which is a beta-carboline.
A lot of alkaloids.
And so if you were just to do a DMT and do the EEG, would it be different? Is the copy beta-carbolines influence this as well? So
Very complex brew, very complicated, and we don't understand it. I talked to Dennis McKim about this. I said, Dennis, how come we don't know more? He says, well, no one's funded me. That's
They won't synthesize it easily.
You can't synthesize it because the alkaloids are so complex. There's like there's 4 or 5 main alkaloids.
They'll try to find an active component.
Yeah, and the brew is just so perfect the way it is.
And frankly, different brews for different ayahuasca actually have different.
Oh, very different. Very different. Yeah, that's the scary thing too. That's the good news and bad news at the same time, because you don't know what the ayahuasca is putting in the brew, right? So yeah.
How long is the session?
Well, average on, for mine are about 4 hours, but some people go 6 hours. And there is one additive called kalipanga that has methoxy DMT. It's got DMT and methoxy, 5-methoxy DMT. And that's different. That's really, and that keeps you going for 10 hours sometimes. You sort of do the DMT for the 4 or 5 hours, then the methoxy keeps you going. But I don't like it because it's very mental and it's like your mind is working overtime on things and you just want your mind to shut off.
Is it a plant admixture?
It's a plant. It grows much better, and so shamans often put the kalipanga in because they can't find the chacruna. So these are two, both have DMT, but the one has this 5-methoxy. So that's why the brews are, I mean, some people tell me about their experience, and I know they haven't taken the best brew because of what they say. Yeah.
What about Ayahuasca?
Ayahuasca is like combining, kind of synthetic DMT with some kind of synthetic MAO inhibitor. I've never tried it, and as long as I could still get ayahuasca, I wouldn't want to. But in the future, that could be the way it gets legalized. Because I don't see a possibility for a brew to be legalized, but I think pharmahuasca might be able to be legalized. And maybe it can be tweaked enough to make it really pretty good. So I think maybe there's a future there.
But there is a legal setting for it in the U.S. currently, right, in certain settings?
Well, the two churches that I joined, I got back from Hawaii, and there's a big center in Hawaii, and I know the head of the center pretty well. They brewed 1,000 liters of ayahuasca. And all the people from the churches of the Santa Diana came, their representatives came, and they had this huge cauldrons, these pots like this big, 5 huge cauldrons. They had wind lowering this big cauldron in this furnace. Took videos.
So
1,000 liters.
this is a US chart because the dinner time peak at 5:30 would not work in Italy or Spain.
I'm afraid when people maybe wait for a later peak. Right? Figure, well, we're not going to get to that first peak, we're going to get the next peak. But I bet you that they do line up with peaks.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But to me, this is amazing. To me, if we change this much and we were actually tuned into this, it would probably be beneficial. We would do certain tasks at different times. Right? If we would be connected to the cycle of the body, then we would we would have classes about different topics at different times a day.
Only once a day.
Yeah. So the idea of stabilization to me is there's many homeostatic mechanisms. One of them is in the brain, and it's, to summarize, it's just there's inhibitory neurons and excitatory neurons. And the way that the brain stays within homeostasis and doesn't get too much in one direction is that there's a balance between inhibitory and excitatory effects. So I think in general, when you think about dysregulation, that's what we're talking about. We're just talking about the imbalance of the excitatory and inhibitory effects in the neurons. And that would mean if we're doing ayahuasca or if an individual is having a difficult experience, that's what's going on one level. So the therapies that would be helpful would be things that we would bring back into the balance. What is going on? It's usually excitatory neurons that are taken off too much. And there's not enough inhibitory neurons.
When you're describing that, it reminds me a little bit of the window of tolerance.
Yeah, very much. It's the same Siegel. This is Daniel Siegel's, Daniel Shore's term.
Alan Shore's term.
Alan Shore, yeah, this window of tolerance is this kind of balance. We're in that window. And he wants us to expand that window so we can engage in more dynamic change. Because obviously we don't want to just be in some kind of neutral place that doesn't have dynamic range. We want a lot of dynamic range and we want stability.
I don't know
I learned about it in my trauma class, the window of tolerance.
It's called a window of tolerance, like a person that's, say, been traumatized or sexually abused or whatever the trauma, they have a very narrow window of tolerance. So if they get stimuli
for ambiguity, for
ambiguity or even loud noises. Yeah. I mean, if you think about PTSD, even a loud noise pushes a person with PTSD out of their window of tolerance.
In the waking state, most of the neurons are inhibitory, aren't they?
Yeah, well, if you think about it, we're taking stimulation in all the time, and we react to stimuli. Like we were having a discussion, somebody says something you don't like. You can feel, we're talking about Laing. Laing senses this person is a stuffed shirt. So what does Laing do? He's feeling this, something's coming in and he's feeling, so he's coming out of his window of tolerance. That happens to me all the time. In my class, somebody says something, I said, oh shit. This, it comes up. Do I act upon it? Sometimes maybe. But usually I don't. But I can't just push it down. So how do I stabilize myself? I'm getting dysregulated at that moment, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit of dysregulation.
Yeah.
I'm bound by social convention not to respond. Just a minute.
Yeah.
And so I'm agitated. So what do? Well, there's different things I could do, right? But I do reflect. I reflect. Maybe Laing wasn't reflecting, right, at that moment. But all of us have a window of tolerance. If we're pushed out of it, we're just like Laing. Just like, how far do we have to get pushed? What was your question or comment?
Has anyone ever been triggered into a state of insomnia from ayahuasca?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I've seen people triggered into a lot of states by ayahuasca, and I have a good friend that I met who is still troubled by her ayahuasca experiences, and she's back.
Right.
But she still has a foreboding that there's something in her that she's frightened of.
Right. And how long would the insomnia?
This has been 3 years for her, for this residue.
Yeah.
But for the insomnia.
Actual insomnia.
Well, I don't know in my own experience, I don't know. I've heard about it.
A day or 2 days?
I think I've heard 3 or 4 days.
3 or 4 days.
3 or 4 days. And in most cases, this is around the issue of risk and harm. I don't want my daughter to do ayahuasca. Okay.
Right.
Not because I think other people shouldn't do it, but she's very, very sensitive. I'm not sure what the dosage should be for her.
How old is she?
She's 28. And she asked me, she said, well, do you think I should do mushrooms? I'll say, maybe mushrooms are okay. But I would just do a little bit first and find out what your dosage is. So the whole issue of risk is dosage, I think. And like, if someone wants to do ayahuasca, I say, do mushrooms first. If you get do a little mushrooms first. See if you can handle mushrooms. If you like mushrooms, don't destabilize you too much. You can enjoy it, maybe just a little bit of fear. Work with your fear until you can really enjoy mushrooms. Then I think you know something about yourself. Something good in regard to how you might respond to ayahuasca. And then take just a threshold dose of ayahuasca. So I'm very conservative. I have a very conservative approach. And then you can always take, a lot of shamans, you can take a small dose and they'll say, anybody wants more? You say, yeah, I want more. So you can go up and get more,
Right, I really like that approach. It's just very common sense. It's very common sense harm reduction approach.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's sort of like a very rigid, no, these people shouldn't do it, and these people, you're okay, but everybody's different. Start with a small dose and see how it goes.
I believe in individual differences. I don't think there's any general rules. I mean, very general rules, like don't take too big a dose the very first time. That's a good general rule for everybody. The shaman keeps pouring the glass. You said, you go like this. You hold your ground. You say this much, no matter how much the shaman wants to pour in your glass, and that's hard to do. To say no, this is the great healer, a great shaman. Or you pour it out on the ground. Get it down to where you want to try it, and
It's always brew at some consistent.
The brews are very different. Some of them have all kinds of sludge in the bottom.
So 8 ounces of ayahuasca is not 8 ounces. Is not 8 ounces. Is that right?
No, not for sure. Like when they have an amazing system in Hawaii. They have mason jars. They have barcodes on every jar. If you can believe this, they barcode every jar, and they really have all kinds of filtering that they do. They filter and filter and filter, so it looks like almost a clear liquid. They pour it into a mason jar at 150 degrees, sealed up, and then as it cools, it creates a vacuum. You know, pulls that mason jar lid down, so you got a vacuum there, and that's going to last a long time.
Now, there are genetic phenotype differences as far as fast liver metabolizers and slow liver. Does that influence this as well?
Yes, sure will. Yeah. In general, 45 minutes most people get off within that range, in my experience. Sometimes for me, I mean, there are times where I think I didn't get off at all, and then I leave the thing and it's like boom, and it hits me. I get surprised sometimes. But in general, yeah.
Frank, it seems pretty hard to see people in the dark, and you know, some people hold their hands up, and like this lady here. Should people just shout out instead of
yeah, shout out.
Hands out? Because
me.
You can't really see everybody.
Did I skip you?
I was just wondering, is there any preparations, spiritual, dietary, or otherwise, that you would recommend?
You know, a lot of talk about diet. I would just say don't eat a big meal because you're not. It's going to be harder to have a good experience with a real big meal, and you're going to have some digestive issues going on. A lot of people say no salt, no citrus, bland food. It's probably okay because bland is good before you do ayahuasca. So think bland.
Just the day of.
The day that, you know, when I drink ayahuasca with a UDV, they have a big meal right before, and I've noticed no problem.
What about fasting? Some people prefer to fast.
If you fast, the experience will be much stronger.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, much stronger. Did I miss anybody else?
Yeah.
Yes, Becky.
Well, I want to ask 2 questions. I mean, is this legal?
No.
I mean, I'm sorry, I'm really ignorant. So could you give me like a one-paragraph history?
If you would fly to Hawaii on the Big Island, you could show up at the Santo Daime Church, and it would be completely legal for you to attend the ceremony and drink ayahuasca. That is completely legal.
Or you could go to Peru.
Or you could go to Peru, but Hawaii's, there's not as many bugs in Hawaii.
You're still in America.
What do you mean by bugs?
Well, a lot of the settings, I could tell you some bed bug stories, but I don't think I'm going to hear
I don't know what you mean by bugs.
Oh, well, a lot of the shamans have centers that you go to, healing centers, but there's mattresses, and you don't know about that mattress. You know, it's been there in the jungle, and there's a lot of vermin, and it's kind of exciting if you like adventure. I enjoyed it, but now I'm thinking, I don't know. I think if you wanted, I like the idea of a hammock, and you have like a mosquito netting on top, and you string it between 2 trees, and you got a pretty good environment there.
Would you describe Santo Daime as a syncretic Catholic church, or is that something different?
Yeah, syncretic just means drawing from all sources, not indiscriminately. They have to sort of have some kind of, like, for instance, the Santo Daime, their founder was an Afro-Brazilian rubber tapper. That when he was tapping those rubber shoes, you were close to the natives, and he met some native people, and they invited him to do ayahuasca. And he had a syncretic religious upbringing, Afro-Brazilian, and some spiritist background, and some grandparents, and he had a little Catholic church, so they kind of had a special version of Catholic church, and some Kardashian spiritism from France. And he had a mission to start a new religion, and that's what he did. And the interesting thing is that they received hymns. Like the teaching are hymns they received during the ayahuasca.
Is it Icaros?
No, the Icaros are the songs that the shamans received. But interestingly, the same receiving of songs. So they both have musical kinds of receiving sacred knowledge and also musical ways of teaching spiritual knowledge. So it's syncretic. And the other tradition, one is Santo Daime and one is UDV, was another Afro-Brazilian rubber tapper. It's like a coincidence. Who had the same kind of thing, but a different vision. And they actually created very similar churches. And then the Batinha, I think it's called, place called Rio Branco in Brazil. There's many there's many different types of churches in Brazil. And you know about a lot of them. And some of them, yes, tell us a little bit about the ones that you, and like in your, where you live. And these are African inspired religions that use ayahuasca.
So it's not church in the Christian sense.
It's church in the sense that it's a building and it's sacred and you go to it and you sing and you have holidays.
It's a generic word, church. It's not like to do with Jesus or Christianity.
Sometimes Jesus is involved.
Yeah, sometimes
Jesus is a shaman.
Yeah, Jesus would be viewed as a holy person in both of those churches. He doesn't have the same position you have in Christianity, but he is.
It reminds me of the spirits.
Yeah, but he has a role. He has a major role. Yeah. He does. He has a major role. What do you have something to add?
It's a syncretic system, so
yeah.
all kinds of, in South America is all Catholic. And, you know, centuries, it's been centuries for Catholic. Yeah. So the indigenous people weave that into their mythologies.
What's that word?
Syncretic.
Syncretic.
Combining things.
Combining.
What does that mean?
I'll speak from religious studies words. It means to combine religious things to make a soup. All religions are actually syncretic. All of them are.
Opposing, often opposing.
Sometimes opposing.
S-Y-N, which is together, and credo, to believe in Latin. So syncretic. Syncretic. Believe together.
Oh. This is, nah, we don't want to talk about that. This is worth talking about. So I met the Dalai Lama, and he invited me to go to his monastery and do research. So I did research, and I figured some things out, and I have some video of myself. And here he is in front of my old computer saying, what's on the screen here? You know? So what the best thing that came out of this was what I've written down here. So we were talking about the difference. I mean, I was studying Tibetan Buddhism at this time, and I'd been 2 or 3 years into it, and I was really a pretty good student. So I wanted to know the differences between the subtle and the gross mind and how that might show up in the EEG. So he talks, he goes into Tibetan. He goes into this esoteric, this incredible esoteric thing, and this translator was talking, and he was talking about all these things, and the heart, and where the subtle mind, according to the Dalai Lama's tradition, is located near the heart. And at the end, in English, it says, but who knows? And I learned so much right at that moment about the relationship between theory and practice. It was more that I learned, and something about him saying it in that way at that moment. And it's guided me ever since. Right. The relationship between theory. He lives in Dharamsala, but he travels a great deal. He lives in Ladakh sometimes. He'll go in his winter residence and a summer residence. So Ladakh,
he'll
back and forth.
That's in India?
Both are in northern India.
Northern India.
Yeah.
I think there was a question way over there.
Okay, thank you.
I guess so. How common is purging, vomiting, and diarrhea, and how can you minimize that chance?
In the beginning, it's quite common. I would say half people maybe purge. I think it's good to purge myself. I think, I've had some of my best experiences crawling on my hands and knees in the bathroom, vomiting in Technicolor. Really, I swear. Because there's something about being broken down that much. I mean, you really get humbled in a major way when your body's not functioning, and we get all these social things about our own filth, pooping and shitting and vomiting, and you're just a total mess sometimes. At the same time, to have your mind open, it's about that. It's about that, and so that can be incredibly profound.
Well, I was interested to hear you said that sometimes people eat a big meal beforehand, because I'm also familiar with the recommendation for the dieta, like to change your diet for a whole week in advance. So.
Yeah, I'm saying there's a great. I'm not saying one's better than another. I'm just saying you'll find great variation.
Different communities do it different.
Different communities do different things. Yeah. Yes.
Would you recommend, or people who are maybe experiencing really intense states or something like psychosis or things like that, would
interested in ayahuasca?
Well, I would not, let's say, anybody who's highly reactive or highly sensitive, whatever category we put them in, may not benefit or need ayahuasca, because they're already, anybody who has a lot of filters that they need to thin out because they can't experience something that's in other words, I could dance rings around my psychotherapists, but I couldn't dance rings around ayahuasca. So for me, it has something to do with how skillful we are at not seeing things about ourselves that we know are there and we want to see. But if you know that much about yourself, you're probably okay if you have that attitude toward yourself.
You felt like you needed it to get to those places.
I
You feel
couldn't.
like your daughter maybe doesn't.
I did all kinds of bioenergetic analysis, a lot of intense sort of neo-Reichian body work, and it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And so I had to get broken down more. But not everybody needs that. I mean, that's not everybody's bad. Yeah. So this chart is the breakdown and breakthrough people. Not everybody's a breakdown and breakthrough person.
How long have people been using ayahuasca?
Well, people argue. I probably think it's around 1,000 years. Some people say it's at the beginning of time. I think there's actually artifacts that have been seen and discovered somewhere that dates it around 1,000. What do you think, Ralph? Do you think that's about roughly?
Well, nobody knows. You're talking about an indigenous, non-written tradition.
I know.
So,
I mean,
no records.
No,
books,
no.
Nothing.
There's objects. There's objects that
They
have
don't even
been.
know when they started combining those two plants.
No,
It's a very
no.
weird thing to do to combine those two plants.
It's very
The
unusual.
knowledge of that is oral.
I
It's
know.
oral.
I know.
So it could be like thousands of years. It could be 100 years.
Yeah, I agree with Ralph.
You're really depth as far as I'm talking about Korean plants in the rainforest. How do you figure that these two plants together would?
Well, there's a lot
Plants
of.
told us
The other
that.
thing that the shaman I've worked with and talked to, and they led me around and I watched what they did. They say that ayahuasca is a master plant, meaning ayahuasca teaches them about the value of other plants, and there's not tobacco's a master plant. So they diet on master plants, and the master plants help them learn about herbs for curing things that aren't psychedelic plants. So there's a tradition of that's why I call them plant teachers. Plants
The
really.
process is called evolution.
Oh.
It's tinkering and natural selection over centuries and millennia.
With a trillion choices.
Yeah. You don't put in the plant that kills people.
What is the relationship between ayahuasca and overcoming addictions?
One of my students just finished his very comprehensive literature review of that topic. So if you email me, I'll just send you his dissertation's great. It's
Can you
up to
give
date.
a brief
The
synopsis?
summary would be there's a lot of small centers in South America, a little bit of work in Mexico that show very promising results. But it's soon. It's too soon to know. I think there's a connection between depression and addiction. So I would say that both for depression and addiction, ayahuasca may prove to be beneficial. And I think the linkage there might be the depression link. And actually, I've studied the literature on the biomarkers for depression, and I have a study planned that's going to look for changes in these biomarkers as a result of drinking ayahuasca. And so it's not funded yet, but I'd like to find out. That's one way to look at it, always from a science point of view. Yeah.
Frank, it's so interesting to me that tobacco, which is so widely both abused and vilified, that it's also seen as this not just a sacred plant, but as a master plant, and it's used so centrally in the ceremony. Are these different species of varieties?
It's a
plant. What do you make of that?
It's not inhaled. It's smoked in a big pipe by the shamans, at least the Shipibo shamans, and it makes me sort of nauseous because it's a very strong tobacco, and I'm lying
Very
there.
high potency.
Very high potency, and you've just drunk the ayahuasca.
But they don't inhale it.
No, they don't inhale it.
With ayahuasca?
No, you drink the ayahuasca. You lay down in the Shipibo ceremonies, laying down. Ayahuasca implying. shaman stands in front of you, and he takes a huge amount of, it's like the same thing that Native Americans do with sage. I think it has the same function.
Yes.
But
it's in the Bible that Jesus breathed on people.
Yeah.
But so you're taking it in by inhaling it?
No, you're inhaling it because it's coming over you. When I followed the shaman around, the Shipibo shaman, when he would do this, I asked him if I could. So I was just sort of tailing around. Every time he would go to one person, I would talk to him a little bit, and he would tell me what he was seeing. And he would look at a person, and he said that I would look, and he could, because he was drinking ayahuasca, he could see the energy field. And certain places in the energy field were dark. And he would sing until they would not be dark anymore.
See, I've had Native American shamans that worked in my clinic, and he could do that. He didn't need drugs. He didn't need ayahuasca. He just could do it when he was in his shamanic mode.
Yeah. So this idea, it's like a feedback. So he would look and sing until the color. He talked about symmetry, and he talked about coloration. So he saw that the illness was associated with lack of symmetry and a lack of vibrancy of the color.
You think it was like energy reading? Like
He described it that way. He was describing, he would keep singing and doing things, and he would sort of like sing until it sort of, clears up.
Did you ever receive that?
I did, yeah. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, and he also does things at the top of the head, which are really incredible too, because you're already on ayahuasca, and you're already, I don't know, getting touched on the forehead. It's really intense sometimes. If you get touched on the head at certain moments, it's like, anyhow, I think it's very, it can be very powerful. And so when the shaman will do that and something blow into your head, it's like, make noises, the making of noises. I don't know, it's a very intense experience.
So it sounds like you would be...
You see it in one of those paintings. One of those paintings that you showed. You saw
He's blowing into the crown chakra. You don't want to think about it.
So you wouldn't be a fan at all if somebody was doing this without a shaman?
Oh yeah, I want to keep an open mind.
Okay.
I'm thinking, whatever works. I'm a pragmatist. My philosophy is pragmatism. Whatever works. I mean, I have my own romantic vision of what I'd like to see for myself. But if someone gets benefit and they want to do it a certain way and they use robots, I don't care. Robots to sing, whatever. Japan, I think robots would be good.
Robots to do what?
To sing. To sing to people, to heal them.
What?
I'm just joking, Ralph.
He doesn't care. He doesn't
So this is the shaman that I was telling you about. He's quite well known, Guillermo. He sings incredibly beautifully. And one time I was there was no one else at the center. It was just him and his cousin and his mom and one other person that made the brew and me. And we were just sitting drinking ayahuasca together. And there was nobody to be healed. It was like, it wasn't healing. And so I was there and just realizing they were just jamming together when they were singing. It's like, I couldn't believe it. They were like spiritual jamming and receiving. And his mom was a tiny little woman, about 75, I think, probably. And she had a tiny little voice, and I leaned up my head right next to her mouth, and she had this amazing singing voice. So gentle and soft. And I thought his virtuosity, he had gotten from the spirits, but he had gotten it from his mom. And he had incredible virtuosity. If you get a chance to, I have some of his Icaros, but they're incredibly beautiful. On the other hand, he's got a little bit of a young woman problem too. So it'd be great to hear him singing. You want to go with a chaperone if you're going to visit him.
Yes. What would your description of, is there a path to ayahuasca as you understand it?
Well, I think people find themselves to ayahuasca in many, some people read Terence McKenna, right? And some people read Burroughs. Right?
Burroughs had a very early work called the Yahi Letters, which is...
Yes, and you read Burroughs, and that's what got you to be fascinated.
Yeah, I think he has a remarkable ability to describe his trips that he had in the 50s. And so I do recommend that book.
Yeah, but I think people find it, you know, some people
I
hear...
No, I don't mean through ayahuasca, but maybe I mean through ayahuasca.
Tell me, rephrase it again so I can hear it.
Like path, like what, I'm thinking of maybe in terms of like, a lot of spiritual traditions have a sense of path that comes with
Yeah,
so
to me that's been my longing, for the to be a more comprehensive spiritual path that has more people acknowledging, like a tradition. That's what would love to see, is a new tradition to grow, like a spiritual tradition around ayahuasca as a sacrament. I think that would be wonderful.
But isn't that what we're doing with life?
No, because I want something new and fresh. Not something, you know, I like the new. I long for something new.
Like a revelation or something.
A revelation. Something that draws in all the things I like. I want a little science to be okay there. I want everything to have a place. I want everything, art, science. Yes.
Do you think the beings that people are encountering, are they projections of the mind, or are they beings that are in the spiritual realm type of thing?
You know, I learned also from the Dalai Lama the value of having an indeterminate attitude towards certain questions. And that's the one that, because if you go either way with that question, you lose something.
If you're committed to one or the other.
You lose. You're going to lose. And if you believe, say, that definitely there are spirit beings, then you're in the situation of having to discriminate among all what you're doing, which ones are which. If you don't believe and everything's a projection of your mind, then you're closing off opportunities because you're not sure anything. So just a not knowing perspective for me is a good stance to take toward this question. But because what you can do is just experientially, there shows up the being. So talk to it. Who are you? What do you want? I interview entities that come. My interview sometimes is like, so what you're up to? What do you want from me? You know, because, you know, from an intellectual point of view, that's craziness, right? But from a navigation point of view, it makes a lot of sense. This is an entity that's showing up. Why not get it to show itself? And I don't expect to hear talk, but I'll look at it and say, show me another form. I don't like this form. Like if this form is scary, I'll just say, show me another face.
Does it work?
Yes. I've learned one thing. You want to be active and ask questions, and don't be timid. You want to engage actively.
Oh, it's like the mountain lion.
It is.
Is that part of the stabilization we were talking about? Like,
yeah, the stabilization is to hold your ground. The shamans talk about this, but not to be ferocious, just to hold your ground. You know? Because to run away, you're going to be afraid. As soon as you run, but if you hold your ground, you're not going to die. It's just weird shit happening in your face. You say, I don't like this. Show another face. I'm not going to hang out here. I'm going to open my eyes. I'm out of here.
Do you remember everything at the end?
This is another thing that was fascinating. When before I was talking about Luna, and I had the little microphone there. So he's had over 1,000 sessions. Because I talked to him every 15 minutes during that session, he said, I remembered more in this session than any of my other 1,000 sessions. So that taught me something.
He verbalized it.
Because he verbalized it. So from then on, I've been verbalizing. Because I want to retain in memory. So just a few words. I actually had a little ticker clip. So something happens, and I'll just say a couple words and set it down. Because I do want to remember. I want to integrate this experience. I don't want to lose it.
Do you recommend like journaling during a session?
Not during. I recommend tape recording. I mean, I recommend using a video camera and infrared. You know?